Chapter 8 What Remains. Marco stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tried to summon enough mana to move a cotton ball. It sat on the counter beside him, weightless, the kind of thing a child with awakened powers could lift without thinking. The kind of thing he'd been doing since he was 3 years old, back when his father had first started teaching him the basics of wind manipulation. Back when everything had been simple and the world had made sense and he'd believed his father loved him. Marco focused everything he had on it, reached for the mana that should have been flowing through his channels like breath, like blood, like something as natural and inevitable as his own heartbeat. Tried to create even the smallest current of air, the tiniest breeze. Anything. Nothing. The cotton ball didn't even tremble, didn't shift, didn't acknowledge his efforts in any way. It just sat there, mocking him with its impossible lightness, with the fact that something so insignificant had become completely beyond his reach. 1 week ago he'd killed 3 clan masters in a single morning. 1 week ago he'd achieved becoming air, a technique so advanced that only 5 people in 1,000 years of clan history had ever mastered it. A technique his father had told him was impossible, that he'd never achieve, that was beyond someone like him. 1 week ago he'd been dangerous enough that his father had sent 50 masters to hunt him down like an animal. Now he couldn't move a cotton ball. Now he couldn't do what a 6-year-old with basic training could manage without effort. Marco's reflection stared back at him from the mirror, and he barely recognized himself. Pale skin stretched too tight over bones that were more prominent than they should be. He'd lost weight this past week, barely eating, body focused on survival rather than sustenance. Dark circles under his eyes made him look decades older than 18. Made him look like someone who'd lived through wars and barely survived. The scar across his left cheek stood out starkly against his pale skin. That permanent reminder of his father's love. That line of raised tissue that Geralt had put there with such precision, such care, making sure it would never fade, making sure Marco would carry it forever. But it was the new damage that made him flinch every time he saw himself, made him want to look away from his own reflection. The black lines were still visible under his skin, dark and ugly and wrong. His mana channels, what was left of them, showed through like poisoned veins, mapping the pathways that power used to flow through. They ran up his arms, across his chest, down his sides, everywhere the energy had moved, everywhere his connection to wind had lived. They looked like someone had drawn on him with ink, except these lines went deeper. These lines were internal devastation made visible. They'd collapsed during the battle when he'd pushed too hard, burned too fast, tried to be more than his damaged body could sustain. When he'd forced healing beyond what was safe, channeled power through pathways that were already broken, refused to stop even when his body was screaming at him that he couldn't take anymore. The medic Morrison had found an underground doctor who specialized in awakened injuries, who'd seen her share of combat damage and training accidents had been blunt when she'd examined him. Your channels aren't just damaged, they're destroyed, collapsed. The temporary pathways you forced open through meditation, they shattered under combat stress like glass under a hammer. Even if they could heal, which is unlikely given the severity, you're looking at years of recovery, maybe decades. You'll probably never manipulate wind again, never wind walk, never achieve anything close to what you had. Marco had asked what probably meant, what that small opening implied. The doctor had looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to give him false hope but couldn't bring herself to lie. There's maybe a 5% chance of partial recovery, 10% chance you regain enough function to wind walk short distances. But master-level techniques, fighting, teaching advanced concepts through demonstration. She'd shaken her head slowly, definitively. That's done. I'm sorry. That part of your life is over. Behind him, through the bathroom door, he could hear the shower running. Joey had done in 20 minutes ago, giving Marco space to process, to examine himself, to stare at his ruined reflection, and come to terms with what he'd become, what he'd lost, what remained. Useless. The word kept echoing in Marco's head like a curse, like a judgment, like the truth he couldn't escape, no matter how hard he tried. He'd built everything on being useful, being strong, being the one who could teach, who could fight, who could lead, being the one people looked to, relied on, trusted to know what to do. What was he without that? Who was Marco without his power? A burden, a liability, someone Joey had to take care of instead of an equal partner. Someone the survivors would have to protect instead of someone who protected them. Someone who took resources without being able to give anything back. Marco reached for the cotton ball with his hand instead of his powers, picked it up between his fingers, crushed it slowly in his fist. Such a small thing, such an impossible thing, something that should have been effortless, automatic, beneath notice. His body was a mess beyond the channels. The wound in his back where Master Y's blade had caught him was healing but would scar badly, a deep, vicious thing that pulled when he moved wrong, that would mark him permanently as someone who'd been defeated, beaten, a match to the one his father had given him, like some kind of sick symmetry. His shoulder where Joey had taken a blade while protecting him ached constantly, a dull throb that never quite went away. Bruises covered his ribs, his arms, his chest in various stages of healing, purple and green and yellow, a map of violence written on his skin. Every movement hurt in some way. Every breath reminded him of damage, but the physical pain was manageable. He'd dealt with pain before, had learned to function through it, to push past it, to ignore his body's protests when necessary. It was the absence he couldn't handle, the hollow place where his connection to Wind had been. Like losing a sense, not quite sight or hearing, but something equally fundamental to how he understood the world, how he moved through it, how he existed in it. For 15 years, from age 3 when his father had first awakened his power until last week when everything shattered, Marco had felt wind as naturally as breathing, had sensed air currents the way other people felt temperature, had known pressure changes before they happened, had understood the movement of atmosphere around him without conscious thought. It had been background awareness, always present, part of his identity, part of what made him him. Now there was just silence, empty space where something vital should be. He couldn't feel wind anymore, couldn't sense Marner flows, couldn't detect other awakened approaching or gauge their strength, couldn't tell if someone was suppressing their signature or broadcasting it. The world felt flat, diminished, two-dimensional, like someone had removed a layer of reality he'd taken for granted his entire conscious life. This is what normal people feel like, Marco thought, staring at his broken reflection. This is what Joey felt like before I taught him. This is what most of the world experiences every day, except Joey had never known anything else, had never had power and lost it, had never felt the connection and then had it ripped away. Joey didn't understand what it was like to be able to do something and then suddenly, irrevocably, be unable to do it anymore. The shower shut off. Marco heard Joey moving in the bathroom, probably drying off, probably taking his time to give Marco more space. They'd been sharing this small apartment for a week now, Morrison's personal backup location that even the Windworkers hadn't known about. 2 rooms, basic amenities, enough supplies to last a few weeks if they were careful. Safe but isolating, cut off from the world. Marco hadn't left the apartment since Morrison and Joey had carried him here, half conscious and bleeding. Hadn't seen any of the other survivors. hadn't checked in with his remaining crew except through brief text messages, hadn't done anything except sleep and hurt and stare at his reflection and try to understand what he was now. Because what was the point? What could he offer them now? What use was a leader who couldn't fight, a teacher who couldn't demonstrate, a wind walker who couldn't walk the wind? Kai died for me, Marco thought, the guilt settling heavy in his chest like a stone. David, Carmen, Yuki, 22 people total, all dead because they followed me, believed in me when I told them we could win, trusted me to keep them safe. And what had he given them in return? A handful of survivors hiding in safe houses, scattered and afraid. A Pyrrhic victory that felt more like defeat. The exposure of the clans, yes, but at what cost? Was that worth 22 lives? Was anything? The bathroom door opened. Joey stepped out wearing just a towel wrapped low around his waist, hair still wet and dripping slightly onto his shoulders, and stopped when he saw Marco standing at the mirror. His expression shifted immediately, concern mixing with something gentle, something patient, something that made Marco's chest ache. "Hey," Joey said softly, carefully. "You okay?" "Yeah, fine." The lie tasted bitter. "Marco," I said, "I'm fine." Joey was quiet for a moment, just watching him with those dark eyes that saw too much, that had always seen too much. Then he crossed the small bathroom and stood behind Marco, close enough that Marco could feel his warmth, could smell soap and clean water. Their eyes met in the mirror. Marco's hollow and exhausted and lost. Joey's concerned and gentle and so fucking patient it made Marco want to scream. "You've been staring at that cotton ball for 10 minutes, Joey said quietly. "I can see it from here. I've been watching through the door, just testing something. And I can't move it. Can't even make it twitch. Can't access my Marner at all. My channels are completely shut. Dead. Useless." Marco's voice was flat, emotionless, drained of everything. Easier than letting the grief through. Easier than acknowledging what he'd lost. "So that's it. I'm done. Finished. Useless." "You're not. Don't." Marco's hand clenched on the counter hard enough that his knuckles went white. "Don't tell me I'm not useless. Don't tell me I'm still valuable or important or whatever comforting lie you're about to say. I can't fight, can't teach advanced techniques because I can't demonstrate them anymore. Can't protect anyone. Can't even feel the wind anymore. So what exactly am I good for? What's my purpose now?" Joey's hands settled on Marco's shoulders, warm and solid and infinitely careful of the injuries still healing beneath the skin. "You're good for being alive, for being here, for being you instead of what you can do, for existing. That's not enough. It's enough for me." Marco wanted to pull away, to reject the comfort, to isolate himself in the grief and guilt that felt more appropriate than acceptance. But Joey's touch anchored him, kept him from completely falling apart, kept him grounded in the present moment instead of spiraling into darkness. "Everyone died," Marco whispered, his voice cracking despite his efforts to keep it steady. "Kai, David, Carmen, Yuki, all of them. They trusted me and I got them killed. I led them into a fight they couldn't win, and they died believing in me. They trusted you and you gave them a choice, a chance to fight for something that mattered. Something real. They knew the risks, Marco. They understood what they were signing up for." Did they? Did they really understand they were signing up to die fighting masters who'd been training for decades? Did 14-year-old David understand that when he followed me? Marco's voice cracked harder, emotion bleeding through the control. "I sent a child to die. A kid who trusted me, who believed I could protect him. David chose to fight, chose to stand at that entrance and buy time for hostages to escape. You didn't make that choice for him. He made it himself. knowing what it might cost. Am the one who taught him control, who gave him confidence he never should have had, who made him think he could stand against trained clan members. Marco stopped, chest tight, breathing difficult. If I'd never taught him, if I'd turned him away when he came asking for help, he'd still be alive. He'd be somewhere safe, somewhere far away from all this. If you'd never taught him, he'd have burned himself and everyone around him when he lost control. He'd be dead or imprisoned or hunted by the clans for being rogue. You gave him years of life he wouldn't have had otherwise. You gave him purpose and community and the chance to matter. Joey squeezed Marco's shoulders gently, carefully. And you can still do that. Teach basics. Help people learn control and breathing and Marner awareness. You don't need to be at master level to show someone how to not kill themselves with their own power. What's the point of teaching basics if I can't take them further? What's the point of giving them the foundation if I can't help them build on it? What's the point of teaching at all? Joey turned Marco around to face him, hands moving from his shoulders to frame his face. You told me once back when we were 13, before everything went to hell, when you first started teaching me that you wanted everyone to be able to learn, that clan secrets shouldn't belong to just the clans, that power should be shared, not hoarded. Was that contingent on you being powerful, or did you mean it regardless? Marco didn't have an answer, couldn't find words that made sense. Your channels are destroyed, Joey continued, voice gentle but firm. Your power is gone. Maybe permanently, but your knowledge isn't. Your understanding isn't. Your philosophy isn't. The thing that made you dangerous wasn't your strength, it was your refusal to accept limits. Your refusal to accept that things had to be the way they'd always been. That's still there. That doesn't require Marner. That doesn't need functioning channels. You don't understand what it's like to have something your whole life and then lose it, to be able to do something and then suddenly not be able to do it anymore. You're right. I don't, but I understand what it's like to have nothing and gain something, to go from powerless to capable. Joey's hands moved to cup Marco's face, thumbs tracing his cheekbones with infinite gentleness. You taught me wind walking when we were kids. When I was terrified and alone and convinced I was going to hurt someone, you gave me power I never thought I'd have. You showed me I could be more than what people told me I was. That's not nothing, Marco. That's everything. Marco's vision blurred. He blinked hard, refusing to cry, refusing to break down completely even though he could feel himself teetering on that edge. Am supposed to be strong, supposed to be the one who holds everything together, supposed to be the leader. You're supposed to be human. You're allowed to break, to grieve, to be scared and lost and not okay. Joey's thumb traced along Marco's jaw, careful and deliberate around the scar tissue. You don't have to be the leader right now. You don't have to be the teacher or the strategist or the weapon everyone needs. You can just be Marco. Just be yourself. That's enough. That's always been enough. Is it? Is it really enough? Marco's voice dropped to barely a whisper, raw and broken. My father cut me and threw me away like garbage. David, Carmen, Yuki, Kai all dead because they followed me. Jenner and the others are scattered and hiding and probably hate me for surviving when they didn't. Everyone I touch gets destroyed. Why the fuck are you still here? Joey was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned in and kissed Marco's forehead with infinite tenderness. Then his temple, then the scar on his cheek, lips lingering there like he was trying to kiss away 5 years of pain. I'm here because I was there that night, 5 years ago, when your father found out about us, about what we were to each other. Marco went completely still. They didn't talk about that night. Never talked about it. Had an unspoken agreement to leave it buried. I was there when he dragged you into that training room, Joey continued quietly, each word careful and deliberate. When he said you'd brought shame on the family, on the clan, on him personally. When he said you chose perversion over honor, sin over righteousness, degeneracy over everything he'd tried to teach you. Joey's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly against Marco's face. I was there when he held you down, when 3 other clan members pinned your arms and legs, when he put that blade to your face and told you he was marking you so everyone would know what you were. Joey, Marco's voice broke. I heard you scream, heard you beg him to stop, heard him tell you that you were dead to him, that you were nothing, that you'd never be anything but a disappointment and a failure and a waste of his time. Joey's eyes were wet now, tears gathering, and I was there when he threw you out, bleeding and barely conscious. 13 years old, told you if you ever came back he'd kill you for real, that you'd shamed him for the last time. Marco's throat was too tight to speak. He could remember that night with perfect clarity, every moment, every word, every second of pain. Could remember the blade, the blood, his father's face, cold and disgusted, the way the other clan members had looked away, unwilling to meet his eyes. You looked at me, Joey said, standing there in the doorway while you were bleeding on the floor. And you could have been angry, could have blamed me for getting you caught, could have told me to leave, to save myself, to pretend we'd never been anything. But you just looked up at me with blood running down your face and said, you coming or staying? I remember, Marco managed through the tightness in his throat. I chose to come. Chose to leave everything, the little safety I had as a clan-adjacent kid, any chance at a normal life, any protection the clans might have offered, because I saw what your father did to you for loving someone, for being yourself, for refusing to be what he wanted you to be. Joey's hands were firm on Marco's face now, grounding and solid, and I saw you stand back up anyway, bleeding and broken and exiled, and you still helped me gather my things, still asked if I was sure, still told me I didn't have to come if I didn't want to, like you were giving me a choice when we both knew what would happen if I stayed. You could have, Marco said quietly, could have told them you didn't know, that you were innocent. They might have believed you. And watch you die alone on the streets. Watch the person I loved get destroyed while I stayed safe and comfortable. Joey shook his head. No, never. Not then. Not now. Not ever. Marco felt something break inside him. The wall he'd been holding up, the emotional control that had kept him functional all week, just shattered completely. A sob tore out of his throat before he could stop it, raw and ugly and desperate. Joey pulled him close immediately, arms wrapping around him, solid and warm and safe and real. Marco buried his face in Joey's shoulder, still damp from the shower, smelling like cheap soap and skin, and let himself break. Let the grief and guilt and fear and exhaustion pour out in ragged, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. I'm sorry, Marco gasped between sobs, words tumbling out incoherent and desperate. I am so sorry. I got them all killed. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't enough. SHH. Stop. You did everything you could. Everything anyone could have done. Joey held him tighter, one hand in Marco's hair, the other solid against his back. You gave them choices. You showed them they mattered. You built something from nothing. That's more than anyone else ever did for them. They're still dead. Kai and David and all the others are still dead, and I'm alive, and it's not fair. It should have been me. Should have been No, don't do that. Joey pulled back enough to look at Marco's face, his own eyes wet and fierce. Their deaths aren't your fault. The clans killed them. Your father killed them. The system that says power belongs only to the chosen few killed them. You gave them life, purpose, community. Don't take that away from them by making their deaths about your guilt. I don't know how to do that. How to honor them without carrying them. You learn. We learn together. Joey wiped at Marco's face with gentle hands. But right now, you just need to feel it. All of it. The grief and the guilt and the fear. Feel it and let it pass through instead of holding it inside. They stood there for what felt like hours, Marco falling apart in waves, Joey holding him together through each one. Eventually the sobs faded to shaking breaths, then to hiccups, then to stillness. Marco felt wrung out, empty, like he'd cried out something vital and was left hollow. He pulled back, wiping at his face with shaking hands. His eyes were swollen, his face was blotchy, his nose was running. He looked like absolute shit and felt worse. Sorry, he muttered, embarrassed by the breakdown. That was necessary, overdue, human, healthy. Joey grabbed tissues from the counter, handed them to Marco. You've been holding that in for a week, probably longer, since the battle started. Maybe since David died. You needed to let it out. Yeah, well, didn't really have time to break down when I was busy trying not to die. Kind of had to keep it together. You have time now. You have space now. Use it. Marco cleaned his face as best he could, composed himself as much as possible, but he still felt raw, exposed, vulnerable in ways that made him want to hide. I don't know what to do. Without powers, without the crew operating, without any clear plan, I don't know what comes next. Don't know how to move forward. Then we figure it out together. Joey's hand found Marco's, fingers intertwining like they had 1,000 times before. Like we always have. Like we did that first night when we had nothing. I'm not going anywhere. You should. You'd be safer without me. Happier without me. The clans are still out there. My father's still out there planning his next move. Anyone associated with me is a target. You could leave, change your name, start over somewhere far away from all this. If that were going to make me leave, I'd have left 5 years ago. That night, when it was actually safer to stay. Joey squeezed Marco's hand hard enough to almost hurt. I chose you then when it cost me everything. I choose you now when you think you have nothing to offer. Powers or no powers, that doesn't change. You don't get to decide what I should want. Marco looked at their joined hands, Joey's calloused from 5 years of training and fighting and surviving. Marco's marked with the black lines of destroyed channels like some kind of curse made visible. 2 kids who'd survived everything the world threw at them, starting from that night 5 years ago when everything fell apart, and they chose each other anyway. I don't deserve you, Marco said, quietly, honestly. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. Joey tugged Marco toward the bedroom, gentle but insistent. Come on. You need to rest. You've barely slept in days. Barely done anything but stare at mirrors and torture yourself. I'm not tired. You're exhausted. I can see it in every line of your body. In the way you're standing. In your eyes. Joey guided Marco to the bed, pulled back the covers that were still rumpled from this morning. Lie down. Let me take care of you for once instead of always being the one who needs taking care of. I'm supposed to be the one taking care of things. Taking care of you. I'm supposed to. Marco. Joey's voice was gentle but absolutely firm, brooking no argument. Stop, just for today, just for right now. Stop trying to be in charge of everything. Stop trying to hold the world together. Let someone else handle it. Let me handle you. Marco wanted to argue, to insist he was fine, to push back against the vulnerability and dependence. But he was so fucking tired of hurting, of planning, of carrying the weight of 22 deaths and his crew's survival and his own inadequacy. Tired of being strong when he didn't feel strong. Tired of pretending he had answers when he had none. He lay down. The bed was soft, the sheets cool against his skin. The room was warm enough that he didn't need blankets, but not so warm he was uncomfortable. For the first time in a week he wasn't running or hiding or fighting or planning, just existing in a moment that didn't demand anything from him. Joey settled beside him, close but not touching yet, giving Marco space while remaining present. Is this okay? Your back, does this position hurt? It's fine. Doesn't hurt as much as it did a few days ago. Healing, I think. Marco shifted slightly to get more comfortable, to find an angle where nothing pulled or ached too badly. Probably scar like hell, but whatever. Not like I don't have scars already. Morrison checked in this morning while you were in the bathroom, Joey said after a moment of comfortable silence. Called on the secure line. Jenner's group is okay. Laying low in the safe house we set up in the East District. She wants to know when we're ready to regroup. When you're ready. Tell her I don't know. Tell her I might never be ready. I did tell her you don't know. She said to take whatever time you need, that the survivors are handling things for now. That they're okay. That you don't need to worry about them. Joey's fingers began tracing idle patterns on Marco's arm, careful around the bruises, gentle over the black lines. Detective Chen's revelations are still spreading like wildfire. It's everywhere, national news, international coverage, social media going insane. The clans are scrambling to contain it, but people are asking too many questions now. About Gerald specifically. About why the Purity Movement leader had clan connections. About what else they've been hiding. Good, let them scramble. Let it all come out. Gerald's gone completely underground. No public appearances, no rallies, no statements. The Purity Movement is fracturing, some members doubling down and getting more extreme, some questioning everything they believed, some joining other organizations entirely. It's chaos. Joey paused, fingers still moving in soothing patterns. Morrison says 5 of the marked members have officially defected, including Johnson. They want to join us, want to help however they can. Join what? We're not exactly operational. We're barely surviving. We're alive. We're regrouping. That's more than the Purity Movement can say right now. That's more than a lot of people can say. Joey's hand moved from Marco's arm to his hair, running fingers through it gently, carefully untangling small knots. The world changed, Marco. What you did exposing the clans, breaking their monopoly on techniques, surviving their best hunters, making them pay such a high cost that they had to retreat, that changed things fundamentally. People are paying attention now in ways they weren't before. Awakened are asking questions. Planless are demanding answers. People are always paying attention until someone more interesting or more scandalous comes along. This will blow over. It always does. Maybe, but right now, in this moment, there are awakened all over the city asking how they can learn clan techniques. Asking if what you said is true, that power belongs to everyone, not just the chosen families. Asking how to find teachers who'll help them instead of gatekeep. Joey's voice softened, became quieter. You started something that's bigger than any one person, Marco. Even with broken channels, even hiding in a safe house, even feeling useless, you started something that won't stop just because you're not at full power anymore. Marco closed his eyes, processing that, trying to understand what it meant. He'd spent so long focused on immediate survival, his own, his crew's, making it through each day without anyone else dying, that he hadn't thought about larger implications, hadn't considered that maybe the battle itself was less important than what the battle represented. "What if I can't deliver?" he asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been eating at him all week. "What if people come looking for teaching, and I can't help them because I'm..." He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the words out loud. Broken, powerless, limited, human. Joey shifted closer, his warmth bleeding through the thin shirt Marco was still wearing. "Then you tell them the truth, that you'll teach what you can, that you'll help them understand the philosophy even if you can't demonstrate every technique, that you'll help them find their own way instead of just copying yours. That's all anyone can ask. That's all anyone should ask. That's not enough. That's not what they need. It's enough for me. It's enough for Jenna and Morrison and Derek and everyone else who survived because you taught them to adapt instead of following rigid forms. You taught them to break perfection and find what works for them specifically." Joey's breath was warm against Marco's ear now, close and intimate. "You're more than your power, Marco. I wish you could see that. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you." Marco turned his head to look at Joey, their faces close enough that he could see the individual lashes framing those dark eyes. "How can you still believe in me after everything? After I got so many people killed? After I lost everything I was supposed to be? Because I know you. I've known you since we were 13 years old. I watched you get cut and exiled and marked and thrown away, and you still helped me gather my things and escape that night. Still asked if I was sure I wanted to come. Still told me I could stay if I wanted to, even though we both knew what would happen to you alone on the streets." Joey's hand cupped Marco's face with infinite gentleness. "I watched you build an entire organization from nothing but determination and knowledge. Watched you teach people who'd been told they were worthless that they mattered, that they deserved power, that they weren't broken or wrong or less than. Watched you stand up to your father and the clans and everyone who said you couldn't, that you shouldn't, that you'd fail. That doesn't disappear because your channels broke. You're still you, still the person who refuses to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. I don't feel like me. I feel like some hollow version, some broken copy. Then we'll figure out who you are now, together, like everything else." Joey's thumb traced Marco's lower lip gently, carefully. "You're not alone in this, Marco. You never have been. Not since that night 5 years ago when we chose each other." Marco's breath caught. There was something in the way Joey was looking at him now, not pity, not sympathy, not even just concern. Something deeper, something that looked like want mixed with tenderness, mixed with determination. Like Marco was still worth wanting, even broken and powerless and useless. "Joey," his voice came out rough, uncertain. "I almost lost you." Joey's voice shifted too, became rougher, emotional in a way he rarely let show. "When Wise Blade went into your back, when you collapsed in that alley, when you stopped breathing for 10 seconds before Morrison got your heart going again, I thought you were gone. I thought I'd lost you and I'd never told you." He stopped, swallowed hard, continued. "I'd never told you how much you mean to me, how much I need you, how much I love you." Marco's heart stuttered in his chest. "You've said you love me before, hundreds of times over 5 years. Not like this. Not like I mean it now. Not with the understanding of how easily I could lose you. How fragile all of this is." Joey shifted even closer, eliminating what little space remained between their bodies. I love you, Marco, not because you're powerful or useful or a good teacher or a brilliant strategist. I love you, the person who chose me that night when you could have blamed me for everything, who looked at me every day for 5 years like I mattered, like I was worth the trouble, who built something beautiful out of nothing but stubborn refusal to accept defeat. You do matter. You've always mattered. And so do you. Even without powers, even with broken channels and scars and limitations. You matter to me more than anything else in this world or any other. Joey's hand slid into Marco's hair, grip gentle but possessive, claiming, "So stop talking about being useless. Stop acting like I'm going to leave. Stop waiting for me to realize you're not worth it. I am here. I am choosing you, and I'm going to keep choosing you whether you're at full power or can't move a cotton ball or anywhere in between." Marco felt something crack open in his chest, not breaking, but opening. Like a door he'd kept locked for 5 years, kept sealed against vulnerability, suddenly swinging wide, like something frozen finally thawing. "I don't deserve." "Shut up." Joey kissed him. It wasn't gentle or careful or tentative. It was desperate and claiming and fierce, like Joey was trying to prove something through touch, trying to show Marco through physical connection what words couldn't fully express, trying to convince him of his own worth by sheer force of want. Marco kissed back just as hard, just as desperately, hands fisting in Joey's shirt and pulling him even closer. Need flooded through him in a wave, not just for physical contact, but for connection, for proof that he was alive, that someone still wanted him despite everything, that this wasn't all just guilt or obligation or pity. Joey's hands moved to Marco's shirt, tugging it up carefully, mindful of injuries. "Can I?" "Yes, please, yes. Don't stop." They broke apart just long enough for Joey to pull the shirt over Marco's head, careful around the bandages, gentle with the bruises. Then his hands were on Marco's bare skin, warm palms mapping bruises and scars and the black lines of destroyed channels with careful reverence. Marco tensed instinctively, self-conscious in ways he'd never been before. His body was a mess, marked and broken and ugly, damaged in ways that wouldn't heal. Who would want this? Who would want him like this? "You're beautiful," Joey whispered against Marco's collarbone, lips following the path his hands had traced. "Every scar, every mark, every line. You're alive and here and real and beautiful." "I'm not. I'm broken and scarred and..." "You are." Joey's mouth moved lower, pressing kisses to Marco's chest, his ribs, the edge of bandages covering his back wound. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, the most precious thing I've ever had, the most important person in my world." Marco's breath hitched, caught somewhere between a gasp and a sob. This wasn't how he'd imagined this going, not with him powerless and broken and barely functional, not with him feeling like a burden instead of a partner. But Joey's touch felt like worship, like reverence, like Marco was something precious instead of ruined, something worth cherishing instead of discarding. "Joey," his voice cracked, "I can't. My channels, I don't know if I can, if my body will." "Can what?" Joey looked up at him, eyes dark and intense and focused entirely on Marco. "I don't know if my body works right anymore. Everything's broken. My channels regulated more than just Marner flow, they affected everything. What if I can't respond? What if nothing works the way it should? What if..." Understanding crossed Joey's face, soft and gentle. "Marco, this isn't about performance. This isn't about doing anything right or proving anything or achieving anything. It's about us. About choosing each other, about being alive and together and connected." His hand cupped Marco's face again, thumb stroking his cheek. "Whatever happens or doesn't happen, that's okay. That's perfect. I just want you, however that looks. whatever that means. I just want to be close to you, to show you that you're still wanted, still loved, still everything to me. Something in Marco's chest loosened, unwound, relaxed. I want you too. I just am scared. Scared of failing at this too. Scared of not being enough even in this. You're enough. You're always enough. We'll figure it out together, like everything else. Joey kissed him again, slower this time, thorough and deep and full of promise. No pressure, no expectations. Just us. Just this. Joey's hands moved over Marco's body with infinite patience, infinite care, learning him in this new context. His touch was gentle but sure, exploring without demanding, offering without taking. Every movement asked permission, waited for response, adjusted to what Marco needed. Marco let himself sink into the sensation. Let himself stop thinking about power and usefulness, and what came next. Just felt Joey's warmth, his solid presence, his hands and mouth, and the way he touched Marco like he was something valuable, something cherished, something worth the effort, and the patience, and the care. Is this okay? Joey's hand slid lower, palm flat against Marco's stomach, just above the waistband of his pants. We can stop anytime. We can just... Don't stop. Please don't stop. I need... Marco couldn't finish the sentence, but Joey seemed to understand anyway. Joey's touch was gentle but sure as he worked open Marco's pants, careful and slow and giving Marco time to say no, to change his mind, to stop this if he needed to. Tell me if anything hurts. If your back starts aching, or if anything pulls wrong, or if you need me to stop. I will. Marco grabbed Joey's wrist, held his hand still for a moment. I need you to understand something. I might not work right. Everything's broken in ways I don't fully understand. If I can't respond, or if nothing happens, or if, then we adapt. Like you taught me. Joey's smile was soft, patient, full of love. Remember, breaking form is better than rigid perfection. We'll find what works. We'll figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations. Just us learning each other in a new way. Marco laughed despite everything wet and shaky but genuine. Using my own philosophy against me. I learned from the best. They shed the rest of their clothes slowly, carefully, with infinite patience. Joey helped Marco maneuver around his injured back, positioned pillows for support, made sure nothing pulled or ached more than it already did. Every movement was consideration, patience, love made tangible and real. When they were finally skin to skin, nothing between them, Marco felt something fundamental shift inside him. This wasn't about power or strength or capability or proving anything to anyone. This was about two people who'd survived hell, choosing each other in its aftermath. Choosing connection despite trauma. Choosing intimacy despite fear. I love you, Marco whispered, the words feeling inadequate but necessary. I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I know how to express. I know. Joey settled beside him, hand sliding down Marco's side with deliberate slowness. I've always known, even when you don't say it, even when you're too busy being stubborn or playing leader or protecting everyone else. I know. What followed was slow and tender and imperfect and perfect all at once. Marco's body didn't cooperate the way it used to, pain from injuries that hadn't fully healed, exhaustion from recovery that was taking everything out of him, channels that had regulated so much more than just mana flow now disrupting functions he'd taken for granted. But Joey was patient. Endlessly patient, creative in ways that made Marco's breath catch and his heart stutter. They learned each other differently than they ever had before, found new ways to touch that didn't aggravate injuries, new ways to create pleasure that didn't require full function, new ways to connect that were about intimacy and trust more than physical capability. When Marco's body wouldn't respond the way he expected, when arousal came slower or differently or not at all in the ways he was used to, Joey adapted, used his mouth, used his hands differently, found what worked instead of forcing what didn't. When Marco got overwhelmed, when sensation became too much, or when his body started hurting in ways that pulled him out of the moment, Joey held him and whispered reassurances until the panic passed, told him it was okay, that they had time, that there was no rush, that this wasn't a performance or a test or something he could fail at. When they finally found rhythm that worked for both of them, when Marco's body finally responded in ways that felt good instead of broken, it felt like victory, not over enemies or fathers or clans or expectations. Victory over the belief that broken meant worthless, over the fear that he had nothing left to offer, over the certainty that no one could want him like this. Marco came apart slowly in Joey's arms, gasping and shaking and more vulnerable than he'd ever been in his entire life. More exposed than any battle had ever made him, more raw than any wound. And Joey held him through all of it, grounded him, made him feel safe even in the intensity of it, made him feel loved even especially in his brokenness. After, they lay tangled together in sheets that were damp with sweat and effort. Marco's body ached in new ways now, good ways mixed with the ever-present pain of healing injuries. His heart was racing. His breathing was uneven, but he felt more at peace than he had in months, maybe years. That was, Marco couldn't find words adequate to what he was feeling. Different, Joey supplied his own breathing, still evening out, but good. Really, really good. I didn't think I could. With everything broken and wrong, and you're not broken. You're changed. There's a difference. Joey pressed a kiss to Marco's temple, his forehead, his closed eyelids. Your body works differently now. That doesn't mean it doesn't work. Just means we had to figure out the new way. And we did, like we always do. Marco turned to face him, studied Joey's face in the late afternoon light filtering through the window. 5 years they'd been together, since that night when everything fell apart, and they chose each other over everything else. Through exile and training and building the Windwalkers and surviving the Blood Hunt. Through everything, Joey had been constant, steady, there. Why do you stay? Marco asked quietly, needing to understand. Really, you could have left that night 5 years ago. Could have made a life for yourself. Why follow me into this? Joey was quiet for a long moment, fingers tracing idle patterns on Marco's skin while he thought about his answer. Because I saw what your father did to you. Saw him cut you for being yourself. For loving me. For refusing to be what he wanted you to be. And I knew if he'd do that to his own son, his own blood, what would happen to me if I stayed. You stayed out of fear? No, I stayed because you bled for me. Literally, you took that blade to your face knowing it would cost you everything, your family, your clan, your entire life, and you still looked at me after and said you coming or staying. Like it was that simple. Like you'd already chosen me over everything else, and now it was just my turn to choose. Joey's hand found Marco's, fingers intertwining like they always did. That's not nothing. That's everything. Marco felt his throat tighten again. I don't remember it being a choice. It was just you. It was always going to be you. Exactly. It was just me. Some kid who your father would have killed if he could. Some nobody with no clan and no future and no value. And you chose me anyway. You've been choosing me every day for 5 years. Even when it cost you. Even when it hurt. Even when it would have been easier to let me go. Joey squeezed his hand. So yeah, I stay. Because you're worth staying for. Powers or no powers. Channels or no channels, useful or not useful. You're worth everything to me. I don't know how to be someone without powers. Don't know how to define myself without them. Then we figure it out together. Like we did that first night. Like we've done every day since. Joey kissed him softly, gently, with infinite patience. You're not alone in this, Marco. You never have been. Not since that night 5 years ago when we chose each other. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Marco closed his eyes, let Joey's presence ground him in the present moment. The grief was still there, Kai and David and all the others who'd died. The fear was still there of his father, of the clans, of an uncertain future. The loss of his power still ate like a missing limb, like something vital that would never come back. But Joey was beside him. They'd survived. They were together. They were alive. And maybe, just maybe, they'd earned the right to rest before the next battle began. What happens tomorrow? Marco asked quietly, not really wanting to know the answer but needing to anyway. Tomorrow you rest more, heal more, let your body recover at its own pace instead of forcing it. Joey settled more comfortably against him, careful not to jostle injuries. And when you're ready, days or weeks or months from now, however long it takes, we figure out what teaching looks like with your new limitations. But tomorrow we just exist, together, alive. That's enough for now. Marco wanted to argue that it wasn't enough, that they should be planning or strategizing or doing something productive, but he was too tired to fight it. And maybe, just maybe, Joey was right. Maybe existing was enough for now. Maybe survival was victory enough. I love you, Marco whispered again, needing to say it, needing Joey to hear it and know it and believe it. I love you too, Joey whispered back, arms tightening around Marco protectively. Now sleep. Actually sleep this time. No thinking about clans or fathers or dead friends or what comes next. Just rest. Just be here with me. That's all I'm asking. That's asking a lot. I know. Do it anyway. For me if not for you. Marco smiled faintly, let his eyes close, let exhaustion finally pull him under. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new threats, new impossible decisions. But tonight he was warm and safe and loved and together with a person who mattered most. Tonight, that was enough. Tomorrow could wait. Hours later, Marco woke in darkness to find Joey wrapped around him like a living blanket, breathing deep and even in sleep. The apartment was quiet except for distant city sounds filtering through windows, sirens, voices, the endless hum of urban life that never quite stopped. Marco lay still for a long moment, just listening to Joey breathe, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest against Marco's back. For 5 years they'd been surviving, running, fighting, building, always moving toward the next crisis, always preparing for the next threat. Never quite safe, never quite settled. But lying here in the dark, wrapped in Joey's warmth, Marco could finally breathe without the weight of constant vigilance pressing down on him. He thought about the cotton ball on the bathroom counter, about his inability to move it, to access the power that had defined him for 15 years, about being powerless in a world that valued power above everything else. And he thought about Joey's words, "You're more than your power." Maybe he was. Maybe he could be. The black lines on his arms caught what little light filtered through the windows, visible even in darkness. Permanent reminders of what he'd lost. Or maybe they were reminders of what he'd survived, of how far he'd pushed himself, of refusing to quit even when his body was destroying itself. Scars weren't just damage. They were proof of healing, proof that the body could survive trauma and keep going. Maybe these were the same. Marco carefully extracted himself from Joey's arms, trying not to wake him, made his way to the bathroom on legs that were still unsteady, still recovering. The cotton ball was exactly where he'd left it, sitting on the counter like a monument to his failure. He stared at it for a long moment, at this tiny, insignificant thing that had become symbolic of everything he'd lost. Then he picked it up with his hand, walked to the window, and threw it out into the night. Watched it drift away on currents he couldn't feel anymore, carried by wind he couldn't manipulate. "Fuck you," he whispered to his reflection, to his father's voice still echoing in his head, to everyone who'd ever told him his worth was conditional on power. "I'm more than this. I'm more than what I can do. I'm more than broken channels and lost abilities." Behind him, Joey stirred. "Marco, you okay?" "Yeah." Marco returned to bed, to warmth, to safety, to the person who'd chosen him even when he had nothing to offer. "I'm okay." "What were you doing?" "Letting go of something that doesn't matter." Joey pulled him close without fully waking, arms wrapping around him in the darkness with practiced ease. "Good. Hold on to things that do matter instead." "Like what?" "Like this. Like us. Like the fact that we survived and get to choose what comes next instead of just reacting to threats." Joey's lips pressed against Marco's temple, warm and drowsy. "Like building something that lasts instead of just fighting everything that tries to destroy us." Marco settled into Joey's embrace, let himself be held, felt something fundamental shift inside him. He'd spent 5 years, his entire time since exile, defining himself by what he could do, what he could teach, how useful he was to others, by his power and his knowledge and his ability to fight. Maybe it was time to define himself differently, not by power or usefulness or ability or what he could give others, but by choice, by stubborn refusal to quit even when quitting made sense, by love for the person who'd stayed when leaving was safer, by determination to make the sacrifices of 22 dead friends mean something more than just casualties in a war. He couldn't move a cotton ball, couldn't walk across rooftops, couldn't fight masters or protect his people the way he used to, couldn't demonstrate the advanced techniques that had made him valuable as a teacher. But he was alive. He was loved. He had knowledge and experience and a philosophy that had helped people even when his power couldn't. He had a community that had survived against impossible odds. He had Joey beside him, choosing him every day despite everything. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to build from. Maybe that was more than enough. "Joey, already drifting back to sleep. When I'm ready, when we start teaching again, I want to do it differently this time. Not just showing people techniques or helping them copy what the clans do, but showing them that power isn't what matters. That choosing to help people, choosing to be better than the systems that created us, choosing each other and choosing community, that's what actually changes things. That's what actually matters." "Okay," Joey murmured, voice thick with sleep. "We'll do it your way. We always do." Marco smiled in the darkness. "Our way. We'll do it our way. Together. Even better. Now sleep. Stop thinking. Just be here." "Bossy." "Someone has to be when you won't take care of yourself." They fell asleep, tangled together. Two kids who'd survived everything the world threw at them since that night 5 years ago when everything fell apart, choosing each other and choosing to keep fighting in whatever way they still could. Outside, the city continued its chaos. The clans regrouped and planned their next moves. Geralt dealt with the collapse of everything he'd built. The survivors, scattered across safe houses, waited for direction and healing. But in that small apartment, in that moment of peace stolen between battles, Marco and Joey simply existed. Together, alive, healing, and that, for now, was more than enough for them both.